Today, if you've ever wanted to hear someone actually speak about their spiritual enlightenment experience, you're in for a treat because I'm going to do just that for you. You may think I'm crazy at the end of this episode, but I don't care because I probably am crazy. Go! Welcome to the I Am Podcast, where we answer all the questions about spirituality and inner peace that you ever wanted to ask, and where we learn these secrets of humanity and divinity through a better understanding of both. I am your host, Sean Webb. Okay, we're going to go a little bit informal today. Over the last couple of episodes, we discussed the spirit and the experience called enlightenment. That is the phenomenon of having a dramatic awakening to spirit, which for dramatic and scope-setting purposes I called meeting God. And so today, so as to remove all ambiguity from what I was talking about, I'm going to explain to you my experience of enlightenment, the portion I can explain anyway, because there's some of it that's just too mind-blowing to be able to describe. And hopefully this will give you a better understanding of what we're talking about on the right side of the body-mind-spirit model. Okay, so my search for truth began years ago. As a kid, I had a typical broken home story, lived on the wrong side of the tracks, super poor, got into trouble as a kid, saw the inside of a jail cell before I could drive, and basically because of my gift of intelligence, I was able to turn that around, went into the military, put myself through college, and started to build a pretty solid career. Now, fast forward to a time in my life where everything is great, right? I'm unmarried, I'm making six figures at the age of 27, I'm driving a luxury import sedan, I've got a hot girlfriend, I'm living in Fort Lauderdale, and my company wants me to write my own ticket for advancement. So everything sounds pretty good, right? Well, there's a little problem with that scenario. I wasn't happy. I mean, I should have been. I certainly should have been happy with all that stuff, but I had attracted everything I wanted to have from a worldly accomplishments perspective, but there still was something that wasn't right. I wasn't happy. So I thought, well, maybe a bigger city and more money is the answer. Maybe I hadn't attained enough. So I took a promotion to Atlanta. I bought a house and kept doing well at work. I met some new friends, dated more hot girls, including a couple longer-term relationships, went out, danced, and partied 4 nights a week, had a blast. I mean, it was fun, but still, even after those changes, there was still something that wasn't quite right. So I started to look for what was missing. Now, you might say, so you turned to religion, right? Well, the thing was, I was strong in my faith already at the time, and I had what I perceived to be a good relationship with God. After I had straightened out my teenage life, I was youth group president in my church for 4 years. I was a born-again Christian, which I now realize was an illusion in comparison to what I'm about to tell you. But at the time, I was comfortable with what I was told was God by the church, and I had a good deal of faith. But at the same time, I had a feeling I was missing something. And I did also start to study some world religions and the commonality of world faiths to maybe see if there was something that I was missing. So I started rereading the Bible and added some other religious texts like the Gnostic Gospels, and I read the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and some philosophical texts like the Tao Te Ching. I picked up books on Buddhism, including one on Zen by D.T. Suzuki, and I learned about the conceptualization or the principles of meditation. So fast forward a little bit to when I was meditating one idle afternoon, because I started the practice of meditation. I had started that day with it's kind of a quiet prayer in my head, reaching out with what I perceived as the core of my being. I called out silently to God or whatever was out there. And I said, if you want me to know, I'm here. And then I started mentally reviewing some of the latest things that I'd read in the Gospel of Thomas and from D.T. Suzuki's book on Zen, when I thought of a Zen Mondo, and it goes, a monk asked Yeshan, who is a master, what does one think of while sitting? Well, one thinks of nothing, the master replied. How does one think of not thinking? The monk asked. By not thinking, the master replied. And these are kind of roundabout Zen sayings to get you out of your thinking mind, but I knew the basic idea of Zen was to sit in contemplative meditation, stepping away from conscious thought, until a satori happened. Now, a satori, although being another word for enlightenment, is explained within Zen Buddhism as the immediate understanding of basically everything. So, thinking I'd really, take another crack at, during my meditation that day of, not trying to think of anything, I began to calm my mind, and I put all the focus that I had in the world into not thinking. So at first, it was very difficult to quiet my mind. I heard music. I mean, you want to talk about music, I got music going on in my head all the time. It's like on permanent shuffle. I saw images, which are thoughts. Memories flew in unexpectedly, and I'd even just found myself off in some mental tangent somewhere every few seconds. It was unbearable almost. But slowly, through the minutes, as I relaxed and focused myself back onto not thinking, it started to get easier and easier to allow my mind to clear itself. And, kind of humorously, I would occasionally have thoughts like, well, am I thinking anything? And then, I'd have to start over the process of clearing my mind, think of nothing. I would start again. And pretty soon, I got to a point where as thoughts would enter my mind, they would simply fly through like they were a passing jet airliner overhead. They would make their noise on the way to another destination, taking my attention for just a second, but ultimately having no impact on my existence and being gone a moment later. So when the conscious thoughts all cleared, I was able to start to feel what it was like to have my mind be totally silent. It was actually a little weird, to tell you the truth, but it was also very calming. It was the first time ever that I didn't have that familiar inner voice saying something, judging something, analyzing something, classifying something. It was the first time in my entire life that within my mind there existed nothing but stillness. And thankfully, I didn't let the actual thought, "this is weird," enter into my head. I just sat and listened to the sound of existence, enjoying this new experience and watching my mind in its absolute quietude. And it was then that I began to feel something. It was like a feeling like none other I had ever experienced before. It felt like some sort of energy had started building within me. It started as a small concentrated glow at first, a sort of powerful warmth coming from within my chest. And it was nice at first. But then it began to grow. And when it did, it grew exponentially. Moment by moment, it expanded in intensity and clarity, becoming bigger, stronger, and more distinct every instant. Now my senses were immediately overwhelmed. Taste, touch, sight, smell, and hearing had either all shut down or were being blocked by the rush of energy that was beginning to engulf me. The enormousness of this feeling had come out of nowhere and was suddenly bigger than anything I'd ever experienced in my entire life. I could no longer feel anything under me supporting my body. I felt weightless. I could no longer hear anything entering through my ears, not even the sound of my own breathing. The darkness of my closed eyelids were replaced by a brightness of a white light that was accompanying this building energy. I could feel my molecules actually start to vibrate at some resonant frequency. Time stood still, and as strange and exhilarating as it was, I laid there in interest, quickly approaching a point of being overwhelmed. It was showing no signs of stopping its growth, right? So I'd started my meditation in a relaxed state, fully awake and aware, simply meditating. But now I started to experience a little fear due to the overwhelming experience that was even now still building. I inhaled sharply, holding that breath, The energy was growing to levels that were now becoming alarming. So, no perceivable thoughts had yet entered my mind, but through that mist of non-thought, there was definitely a general feeling of being in over my head in that scenario, which was then immediately followed by a realistic awareness that there may be a great sense of danger here. I mean, what was happening? You know, my eyes were closed, yet I was going blind with the brightness of a light. I couldn't hear anything outside my body, yet a vibration of energy was humming so loudly within me that it shook the particles of physical existence both within and without. I knew I was lying on the bed because that's where I had started. But I couldn't feel anything supporting my body from passing through not just the bed, but the floor and the earth itself. This experience was actually beginning to scare me. And as it continued, out of the weightless feeling and the constant building level of energy, I began to feel like I was losing my grip on the world itself. Possibly slipping away into some other dimension, but at the very least, losing the grip on the time and place where I had started my meditation. It almost felt like my body was no longer where I put it, or more accurately, that my spirit was slipping from the confines of my body's form to somewhere else. And I think it was probably at that moment that some thoughts had tried to form in my mind, because I remember thinking, you know, like, am I dying? Am I having a heart attack? Am I having a stroke? Is this some kind of hallucination? Why can't I move? What is going on here? Did I fall asleep and this is a dream? Why can't I stop this? And I had not yet started breathing again. And I felt like I was losing my grasp on my physical existence itself. And this is when the real fear kicked in. I was horrified. I was actually on the verge of panic at this point. I felt this energy buildup was on the verge of spinning way out of control, and I wanted no part of it. I was clinging so tightly so as not to leave my body because I thought I was dying. And I thought I was fighting for my very life. And I was looking for a way to try to stop the whole thing. When, from out of nowhere, I felt the idea of two words that simply burst in and interrupted the fear and surprise I was feeling. And I didn't hear the words, so I wasn't hearing anything, but I felt them. And they came out of nowhere to say, let go. And at first I was like, well, that. I'm not going to die and just give up. You know, I thought it might be my subconscious, you know, just trying to give up. You know, I was going to fight to survive. But then again, the feeling of those two words came through a second time. But this time, seemingly with a force that shook the whole universe. Let go. And frankly, I was still like, well, I don't want to die. I got too much good stuff going on. Too many people will miss me. My mom's really old and needs help now, you know? We're moving her out of her house and yada, yada, yada. But that last let go, I got to tell you, was pretty damn powerful. So I was starting to question whether I should maybe let go. And so there came this moment where I was facing a choice. Should I try to hang on to my world and not leave my body and my thoughts and my very life? Should I try not to relinquish my existence and fight to stay alive? Or should I trust the feeling that was being communicated to let go? And it was at that moment of choice where I was terrified by the level of energy building inside me, where I thought I was dying and being pulled out of the world itself, where that energy started to transition into an indescribable and unbounded feeling of love. And where a final repetition of that same message came through, but this one was almost like a whisper in my ear from someone that I had known forever and trusted implicitly, who was hugging and enveloping my very being. It was a very comforting, very personal let go. And there was no more resistance from me at that point. I surrendered. I mean, I was like, if I'm dying, so be it. I want to be with whatever that is. And my body finally exhaled slowly, as how I might imagine it would, that, if that breath were my last on this earth. And I let go my grasp on where I was, and on who I was, and on what I was. And I let go of absolutely everything. I surrendered all. I'd been told through some feeling that I trusted implicitly to let go, and I did. I let go of everything. My inner balance faltered, and I experienced what I can only describe as spiritually falling backwards into the vortex of energy that was still now even growing. The light that I had perceived engulfed me. The vibration, the hum that I was perceiving felt like it ripped my very molecules apart, atomizing me into billions of particles that mixed in with whatever was happening. I had actually become part of the vortex of energy. My hum of existence was in complete sync with that of God in the universe. I was not breathing, I was not thinking, I was just not. Now, about what came next. First and foremost, the underlying base of the entire experience was accompanied by an overwhelming and absolute feeling of pure love and complete acceptance. Upon being consumed by the vortex of energy, the first thing that I experienced was a pure and unlimited love. It was amazing. But really, it was more than that. I was loved, and I was love. I was accepted, and I was acceptance. I felt that my body had either dematerialized or my spiritual presence had left my body entirely. Truthfully, I accepted that I'd passed into the afterlife. I was dead. There were no physical senses of sight, sound, smell, touch, or taste. Everything I perceived as feeling. I saw images not through my eyes. I had sounds not through my ears. Everything I saw and I heard, I loved. And everything I learned, I accepted. And I got to tell you, this was not my human nature to do so, but I was being guided to do so by the mixture of existence that was created when I was drawn into the vortex of energy and engulfed by the light that accompanied it. It was almost like I was along for the ride on this thing, and I didn't mind a bit. And at the time, and even still now, there was not and is not a shred of doubt within me that the experience I was having was that of being with God. There was no white-bearded man on a throne. There was no long-haired Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha in flowing robes there to greet me. There was only the light, the humming, the vibration of existence, and a love that transcended any feeling of love that I had ever experienced before. I was beyond being me at that moment. There was no more me. I was beyond body, I was beyond mind, and I had been enveloped and become one with love itself. And that was when the amazing stuff started, because in comparison, that's a little blasé. Because what followed next simply blew me away. Because along with the unlimited conditional love, there was also an incredible and unlimited intelligence present. And being part of it meant being part of that intelligence. And at that moment, I started being flooded with answers. All the answers to every question that had ever been asked by man flew through my existence like 1 billion gallons of water being forced through a screen door. At times, it was overwhelming. It was like drinking from a fire hydrant. That said, just as it would get to a point where, it seemed like there was too much to take in, the flow of energy and the information tapered enough to balance the levels that were discernible, and it calmed the turbulence. It was as if God had plugged me into his own intelligence and understanding of the universe, being, willing to freely share it, and yet was also somehow protecting me from becoming overwhelmed by controlling the flow of information so that the screen door of my existence didn't get ripped off its hinges. I learned 1,000 lifetimes of wisdom in just a few seconds. And in those few seconds, I learned all the answers about God, all the answers about life, the comprehensive explanation to the meaning of it all, and the answer to the question why, which is a big one, by the way. And all that is just where it started. From there, we went on a tour of the human condition. I was shown how all the moving parts in organic life come together and how it's all intelligent. And then I was given a very important lesson, or what I perceived to be a very important lesson, where I was shown some horrible human atrocities, where I should have been repulsed, where I should have had some sort of negative emotional reaction, but all I felt was pure love and pure compassion for both the victims and the bad actors. And I got the feeling that this was a very important lesson, because the compassion for the bad actors was just as powerful as it was for the victims, because the feeling was that they were lost. They were separated from God by their mindful illusions, and they were in pain themselves. And in that separation, they were causing harm to others when it's not in their true nature to do so. There was a real compassion and an unconditional love for the bad guys, and it blew me away. And so then I saw some mass human death and destruction, but the feeling of love and compassion persisted, and without a need to do anything to intervene, because the people who died were simply reintegrated with the source. Everything came back to the life energy that transcends the body and the mind, and everything simply continued to be all good, just like it was before the event. And life adapted, as it is designed to do. And after countless other lessons on compassion and love, because this went on for a while, I found myself in control of the tour bus. And so I hit the gas. I got to look at the entire universe all at once. All the galaxies, the circular infinite model that makes it all up. I got to perceive the illusion of time. I got to see how space folds back onto itself and connects things that we see as, being separated by unimaginable distances, but that are basically in the exact same place. It's really hard to understand. And then I got to zoom in and see the breakdown of energy itself, down to the fundamental squiggles that make up everything, that are not only an empty nothingness, but that carry the intelligence of God everywhere instantaneously. It was crazy, and very much beyond explanation. And even though this went on for hours, we're still not even scratching the surface of this whole experience. There are some portions that my mind still can't get its arms around. And there's some things that I'm just not going to share. I mean, maybe someday I'm in deathbed, but probably not. And this is probably a good place to stop anyway, because words can't do this experience justice, and it would be impossible for me to formulate the sentences to be able to convey anything meaningful about some of the most profound moments. But the other portion of why we should stop is because this was an experience for me to learn from, and it's an experience that you can also have. And I would rather have you discover this experience for yourself and encounter it firsthand, because if you wind up just believing what I say and you don't go find it for yourself, you're thrown right back into a situation of having faith instead of knowledge. And look where that has taken us over the last few thousand years. You need to replace faith in God with direct knowledge of God by meeting God directly, because the experience that I had, this whole plugging into immense energy and immense intelligence, is waiting for you. And after you meet God, you'll see so much more in the Bible that you didn't see the first 10 times you read it. It's like it's a different book. And you'll be able to recite your own Tao Te Ching. You won't need Lao Tzu's. And you'll understand the Bhagavad Gita like you wrote it yourself. It provides a whole new understanding of existence in the universe and divinity. And here's the thing. Don't go thinking that I'm special or that I think I'm special, because I'm not. This whole little story is about an experience that you are meant to have, and that it's one you should have, because even though I thought I was dead, I was with God in heaven, and I didn't give a shit that I was dead. I was awash in the agape type love and acceptance that you only read about in books, and it seemed like a lifetime had passed when I took my first breath of my new life. And I realized that I wasn't dead. And I have a suspicion that's really what being born again actually means, by the way. Because I thought I was born again before. I was told that I was born again before. Not even on the same planet, let alone even the same ballpark. So anyway, to wrap up, I don't know how long I wasn't breathing, but my body seemed to be starved for oxygen. The white light at the point that I was started to breathe started to recede. But receding with it was every bit of pain and suffering, every bit of doubt and spiritual uncertainty that I had ever experienced. What receded with that dimming light was my misunderstanding of how I thought pain and suffering was just a part of life. It isn't. And in addition, what receded was my misunderstanding that us regular humans can't possibly give unconditional love and compassion. We can't be altruistic. We can. In those moments, pain and suffering had left me, and pure love and compassion had become my first nature. And although I hadn't felt them up until that point, tears were streaming down my face. Love for everything in the universe had filled my heart. I could still see the energy that made up the material things in my bedroom. I could now feel the energy in the bed under me. I was right exactly where I had left myself. But at the same time, everything was brand new, and I was a brand new guy. And all I could think to utter were the words, "Thank you." And I bawled like a baby, just repeating, "Thank you," for I don't know how many minutes. That moment was all that I had ever needed, and it was more than I had ever asked for. And I was grateful. From that point forward, my life has been awesome. I have not been plagued by pain and suffering that most of the world experiences. I understand stuff I shouldn't be able to understand, but that helps me help other people. I got no complaints. So I quit my 6-digit job, sold most of my stuff, and started to try to figure out how to tell it, to share it. And so now I have a free video podcast that is explaining spirituality and inner peace, and is explaining for the first time in history the slow motion process of how things like anger, sadness, and fear actually come into existence within the mind, and why they do. And we talk about it in simple everyday terms with real life examples. And I hope that it helps, by the way. And please let me know if it does. Sean at iampodcast.com. I know this is going long. So, Jesus said narrow is the gate and the path that lead to life, and few are the number who will find it. And Buddha said, a man becoming enlightened is as rare as a sea turtle coming up for a breath every 100 years. If that sea turtle were to stick its head through a knot in a piece of wood floating on the surface of the ocean. That's how common enlightenment is. But I think if we start teaching people what's possible beyond the standard messages of some blind religious leaders who are just repeating what they've been told, we could introduce some people to the option of getting them the truth from the horse's mouth. And if they find that natural love and compassion that's within them, and that life without pain and suffering that they were meant to have, the one that's full of joy, the world would be a much better place to live, and would probably also be a much better place to leave to our kids. What do you think? Let me know. See you next week. Peace.